Hey everyone, welcome back to Tactical Magic Podcast. This is Molly Mandelberg, your host, and this is a episode about podcasts. So it's very meta. Everything I do is pretty meta these days, but I haven't had an episode about launching, sharing, monetizing podcasts in a while. And if you are someone who has a business, if you're someone who even just has a message that they want to share with the world, I think you are going to love the guest that I have for you today. So hang tight. We'll be back in just a second. It's not just about mastering technology. It's not just about brand or messaging. It's not just about making more money. It's about showing up in a big way so your people can find you. This is about bringing your most wild and authentic self into the hustle and grind. Welcome to Tactical Magic, a business strategies podcast for the warrior goddess entrepreneur. Awesome. So Chelsea Riffe is a mindset and podcast coach, helping creatives, coaches, and entrepreneurs launch, grow, and monetize their podcast. She also the host of the top-rated podcast, In My Non-Expert Opinion. Welcome to the show, Chelsea.
Hi, I'm so excited to be here.
Hi, so glad to have you here. So tell us a little bit about your journey of becoming a podcast host.
Yeah, so I went to school because I wanted to be a sports reporter. I wanted to be the next Aaron Andrews or Sam Ponder. And I realized that is a very competitive industry. You don't get paid a lot. You have to live in random weird towns until you have your big break. And I was just given a lot of warning signs to not go down that path. But I loved recording. I loved hosting. I loved interviewing people. I really liked storytelling. So I went and got my master's at Loyola for a master's called Digital Media and Storytelling. And we learned how to tell stories through audio, video, data, all these different platforms. And I started testing what I liked. I tried blogging. I think I did one blog post and I was like, this is too much work. I did an Instagram, I was trying to do a branded Instagram and show beauty tips and makeup, and people just didn't get it. This is way before influencers were a thing. And so my friends were kind of like, I don't understand what you're doing. You're just posting beauty tips. And now it's really funny because beauty influencers are laughing all the way to the bank. So I was like, should have stuck with that one. But then I was just feeling really unfulfilled. I was working a corporate job and I didn't have any creative outlet. And then I remember hearing about this new podcast called Serial, and I was listening to it and I'm like, this is incredible. It's almost like making a movie through audio. There's so much storytelling and visualization involved with creating a compelling story. And I was like, this might be my thing, because I didn't really like video. I didn't really like writing and SEO optimizing and doing all these different things for blogging and taking photos. Wait, I can just talk and talk and talk, and I don't have to worry about limits or algorithms or capping my voice or anything. So I started a podcast in 2017 and it just clicked. I was like, this is my medium. So yeah, I've had my podcast now since 2017, and that's how I got into it.
Awesome. So tell us a little bit about what your podcast is about.
Right now, it's a lot about remote work, travel, lifestyle, entrepreneurship. It did not start that way. It was very focused on health and wellness. My first interview, my literal first episode, was my chiropractor. I just found it fascinating how the body worked. And that's what prompted me to keep going, was that curiosity to just find interesting people in the health and wellness space. And then it evolved. Then I talked about dating. Then I talked about travel. Then I talked about starting my business. Now I'm talking about lessons I've learned in business. And I think that's the beauty of podcasting, is it evolves as you evolve. So now it's really the stage of life that I'm at.
I love that. Yeah, I've interviewed another podcast coach before who talks about how he started different podcasts for different passions that he had, because it made those aspects of his life be tax write-offs. He's like, I have a podcast about wine just so that I can go on wine adventures and everything's a tax write-off. I'm like, that is smart.
Oh, okay. Hold on. Let me write that down.
Yeah. Whole new adventure for sure. So you do this also while traveling. Is that right?
Yeah, I have been traveling. I've been traveling since 2019, but in the last 4 months, I've really been traveling with a group of remote workers on a trip called Remote Year. And we've switched countries every month. And then within each trip, we've been doing a lot of side trips to different places around. And I still have interviews to do. I still want to record my podcast. So I had to find something that's really portable, like the microphone I have right now. And I try to record as much as I can in quiet places. I cannot always say that it's easy. There's times where I'm like, this room is way too big and the sound is bouncing, or I go to a co-working space and you can hear people in the background. And oftentimes I record at home in my room, which prevents me from going to the co-working space and bonding with some of the people that I'm on the trip with, which is kind of the downside of it. But I'm like, I would rather have better audio in my room than go to the co-working space. And those are some of the things you have to consider when traveling, is like quiet and silence is a big piece of podcasting. And so if you're on travel to be stimulated around people all the time, like you do have to figure out how podcasting can fit into your schedule.
Totally. And how to find strong enough signal. I know, probably going on a remote year with people who are all working remotely, you guys are finding better Wi-Fi than the average person traveling to hotels or hostels or guest houses or even Airbnbs. Like, it's not a reliable thing. Right now, I'm parked outside my brother's house in my van in near Austin, Texas. And I figured out a way to make Wi-Fi extender work out in the van that's like slinging off of his Wi-Fi. But I swear, before I thought of that, this town is the most dead signal town. Like, for being well populated, it has the worst cell signal to hotspot from. That I would be driving around this town looking for, like, testing my bars and like checking my speed test and like trying to figure out anywhere that I could work from in this town for, the last few years that I've come to visit while in the van. It was stressful. It's stressful to feel like I have this call, I have this person showing up to do this beautiful thing, and I have no way to make it solid enough to make it work. And that can be stressful. So finding good enough signal, finding quiet enough space to work, for sure. What are some of the things that you have done or figured out to sort of keep the work flowing, I guess, to keep yourself in the mindset, to keep yourself productive, to stay on schedule with something as like regular and consistent as a podcast?
Yeah, I think I definitely had to block off times in my calendar software like Calendly that I was available, because I'm in a different time zone now. And that was something I had to consider. Like, I can't be recording all hours of the day because that's not even when some of the people I'm talking to are awake. So blocking those times and knowing that I came here to travel as well. So I don't really want to be working on Fridays or doing interviews because those are days I'm probably traveling. So I made that a system. Was like, I don't do interviews on Fridays. I don't do interviews on Mondays. It's usually between Tuesday and Thursday. I have very specific windows. That's a system I had to set up for myself. Also, yeah, like you said, doing research of places that have Wi-Fi and asking the team here, like, if the Wi-Fi isn't good, can you please send me to a place that is, or like move me around, because my job right now actually is podcasting and helping people podcast. So I need that environment to be set up for me. And then I've actually even Googled podcast recording studios in some of the cities I'm going to, or asked Facebook groups, does anyone know of a studio? Or do you have like an in-home studio I could rent out, just to see if those are available? Because some of these cities, you'd be surprised that, podcasters and video and things like that are taking off, and they might have a studio. So that's always worth checking out too. I actually did that back home. I'm from a really tiny beach town where podcasting is like, what is that? And I found someone that rented a studio in the back of their house, and he edited it on the spot, and it was great. But it was something I had to do a lot of research about, and it's definitely something you have to take some time and carve out to see how it fits into your life.
Yeah, and create the space for it, for sure. And there are co-working spaces in so many towns across the world now, that it is easier to find space to work than you would think. And even some public libraries have like private study rooms. I've done plenty of podcasts in public library study rooms where you're like, I rent this room for 2 hours and it's mine, and the library is already quiet. So you just kind of try not to be too loud of a person, but they make those rooms so that you can be talking in them to other people. But yeah, there's ways to do it. There's ways to figure it out. And it does take some research and some pre-planning in a way that you don't often pre-plan. I mean, I didn't often pre-plan my travel in such a way to accommodate that before I had a business, before I had a podcast. So it's something you have to definitely consider. One of the exciting things you do and you teach and you help people do is monetizing podcasts. So can you tell us some of the ways that can be done and how people do it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the most traditional way that people think of is brand sponsors. And a lot of times people hear that and they're like, I don't have millions of downloads. I don't even have 1,000 downloads. How could I get a brand sponsor? first things first, you can always find someone to partner with, even locally. So you could find your local yoga studio to sponsor your podcast. You could find a local smoothie bar to sponsor your podcast. Anything local, you want to support local businesses, and they probably want to support a local business or creator as well. So start local. You could even do exchanges like, hey, in exchange for 3 months of yoga, I'll put you in my podcast for 3 months every time I have a podcast episode. So you could do it like that. You could also look at younger companies that are getting investment money, because when companies get investment money, they need to spend it really quickly. That's how they are able to scale really quick. They start hiring teams, they start doing a ton of marketing, they start testing out all these different things. And because they're younger companies, they don't really have a system or strategy yet for what works. So they're throwing their money everywhere. They're like, let's try Reels, let's try TikTok, let's try podcasts. So when you see these new apps get a ton of investment money, like there's one that I worked with called Open. They have in the last year gotten like 2 rounds of funding, and I reached out to them and it was the perfect time because they're like, yeah, we're doing a lot of testing with our marketing right now. This could make a lot of sense. So you just want to kind of follow like companies that are getting investment money, which you can do on websites like TechCrunch or Crunchbase and just see who's doing it. And also just listen to podcasts and what companies are advertising in there. HelloFresh, we've all heard an ad for them. We've all heard an ad for Blue Apron or BetterHelp and all these different companies that advertise on podcasts. That's really good news because they believe in ads and podcasting. So you can pretty much go to them knowing already that they will say they're at least interested in putting ads in podcasts. So those are just some of the traditional ways. But let's say you have smaller numbers, you can create packages. So let's say your email list, even if it's not big, let's say you have a really high open rate and engagement rate, you could include emails as part of your package and say, hey, I can put you in my podcast and I'm happy to include you in my weekly newsletter and throw in a few Instagram stories or reels and create a package. And then you create tiers for them and you choose the tier that's best for them, obviously making each tier a different appealing, not only for them, but for you, what's going to make most monetarily sense, how much time you're putting into things. But that's what's worked for me because I didn't always have the highest numbers, but I would use the stats that were on my side, like my open rate, the fact that I don't have many people unsubscribe from my newsletter, the fact that I have a high engagement rate on Instagram. You want to pull out your best stats and feature those to brand sponsors. Mm-hmm. Now, let's say you're like, I don't know about brand sponsors. Maybe there's other ways. There are. You could do bonus content. You could create a whole subscription channel and just deliver exclusive content. So for example, Molly, with you doing coaching, you could say every month you get a bonus episode where I just answer my clients' questions, or you submit a question and I answer on my new exclusive bonus podcast. Or we do an on-air anonymous coaching session and I pick one listener every month to do that. And then people pay X amount of money per month and you have a subscription channel. You could also create merch, water bottles, hoodies, phone cases. Like there's so many fun ways to create merch and you can make money off of merch. You could do live events, rent out a conference room at a hotel, a local bar venue, a local comedy store, and do a fun live podcast and make money off the ticket sales. So there's always fun ways and creative ways to do it that don't involve always partnering with brands.
Totally. And I'll say, because I mostly am, broadcasting to entrepreneurs and I'm mostly showcasing entrepreneurs on my show, there's ways to create like collaboration between you and your podcast guests too. So some of the people who come on my show, I have affiliate relationships with, where I go on their show and they go on my show. That's the basic one. Like Chelsea and I are guest episodes on each other's shows. And then it can go bigger from there if people have affiliate things set up for their programs and courses. So if I have somebody on my show and they're promoting something awesome, sometimes they make me an affiliate for that. I put their special affiliate link for me in the show notes, and anyone who falls in love with that person on that episode and goes and buys their program, I get some sort of commission or kickback from that because they got that client through the exposure they got through me. So there's tons of ways to bring a monetary aspect into it. And yeah, I interviewed somebody recently who does human design and gene keys for business owners. And her podcast, when I went on her show, she's basically coaching people the way she coaches her clients. And her whole podcast is basically just showcasing the magic of the work that she does. And that is amazing marketing for bringing in new clients, because people are like, oh, you like taught that person so much about what they do or who they are so that they can enhance what they do. And I want to know about me now. And so they want to come in and do that. So there's tons of ways, and brand sponsorships is like the obvious way. And I love how many creative ideas, even within that you can come up with. So you help people do this stuff. Tell us what it's like to come in and work with you and get your support to launch a podcast.
Yeah, usually people have been wanting to launch a podcast for a long time, similarly to how I did. I sat on the idea for a year. My ex even bought me a microphone because he knew how much I wanted to launch it. And I still was just like, I don't like the sound of my voice. I don't even have a business. I don't know what I would talk about, like who would listen to me. That's usually the stuff that's stopping us. People know what they want to talk about, or they have an idea at least of what they're interested in. It's all the mindset stuff that they're like, who am I to start this type of podcast?
Mm-hmm.
So when you start to work with me, the very first thing we do is we have a strategy session and we just brain dump. Like, who are you? What is your vision? Who are you helping? What type of impact are you going to make? I just had a strategy call earlier today, and the prompt was basically, if your podcast was shared in the group chat, what do you want people to say about your podcast? And that's a really fun prompt because you get to start visualizing, who's even listening to this? Like, what group chat is it going to? What are people saying about it? What type of reviews am I getting? So that strategy session is really fun, not only to brain dump, but start to really understand how your ideas could fit into a podcast. So from there, we brain dump and then we extract everything and start to create structure, because this is the biggest thing why people start burning out with podcasting. They don't have any structure and they don't have any systems. I experienced this where I was like, I love podcasting. I love talking. This podcast is going to go on for 10 years. Like, I'm never going to stop. And then I was like, this is a lot of work. Like, even if you're working with an editor, like sending the editor notes and giving them the headshots and the links that you need. Like, it takes time to gather those materials and set up automations and workflows. I didn't have any of that. And I actually stopped doing my podcast for like 6 months because I was like, I don't have anything to support me. And it's so overwhelming. And I was working full time for corporate America when I started it. Mm-hmm. So that's what I realized is a big, big issue is people start it and then they're like, oh my God, this is a lot of work. I can't do this anymore. So part of my work is figuring out those systems. How can we create, a Notion dashboard or a Google folder or something for your file management? And how can we make it work for your brain that every time you record is this easy, efficient system that you don't feel overwhelmed and you actually feel excited to podcast? That's a big piece, is creating structure. And for business owners, I know that's a lot of your audience. We figure out how is your podcast an extension of your business without being overly salesy, where every episode is just talking about your services and your mastermind. It's like, let's zoom out and do some more high level content marketing through the stages of awareness and the different funnel levels that we're looking at. Let's create content for each of those. Let's optimize your titles and show notes for SEO. Let's think about listener engagement tactics. These are all things that come with the strategy of podcasting, because I find that's the other piece of feedback. People love it in the beginning, and then they're like, no one's reviewing it. I don't have any new leads. No clients are coming. No one's DMing me. Like, I feel like I'm shouting into the abyss. Usually it's because there's no strategy in getting your community involved and you have no engagement tactics. So that's something we work on together too, is making sure it feels fulfilling and that you feel like there's an even energy exchange, because Molly, the podcasting is a labor of love. It does take a lot of work and you want to feel like you are getting invested back into, whether that is from the downloads, the words, the reviews, or new clients. And so that's a big piece of my work, is making sure that you are feeling fulfilled while you're podcasting as well.
Yeah, totally. And systems is such a huge part of it. I took a 6 months hiatus my first year of my podcast as well, because I was like, it's too overwhelming. And that was like the beginning of my van life adventuring too. So I was like suddenly living a completely different lifestyle and was like, oh, I need to figure out how to maintain this. And at this moment, I need to take a break. So that's totally normal. And it doesn't have to be that way if you start with the systems. Like, I'll give one example. When somebody books to be an interview on my show, the intake form while they're scheduling is giving me their headshot, their website, their permission for editing and publishing, what they recommend the name of the podcast episode be, asking them questions if they want to submit questions basically for what I could ask them on the show, just if they have suggestions. I usually don't use them because I forget to look at that part, but I also just like following the energy of the conversation. And also their social media handles, they upload their headshot, like all of that is happening in the scheduling process, which means after I'm done recording the episode, I can literally forward that email I got of their like booking, and it has all the information that my team needs to finalize the publication of that episode. So it's like so streamlined and so easy. And that makes me wonder, do you have a team? You mentioned having an editor. Do you have a team working for you to help you make the production side easier?
Mm-hmm. 100%. That I definitely invested in that early on. I know how to edit. I went to school for editing. I don't like it. It's like, there's some things in business that you're just like, I don't want to do this and I don't like it. So I have an editor, but to your point, without systems or giving them any information, that's a really big myth too, where people are like, I'm just going to record and hand it off to my editor. I'm like, they're not mind readers. Like, you do need to include the links, like you said, the show notes, like at least something to work with, some edits, some quotes that you want them to pull. And when you have a streamlined system in place, it makes the relationship so much easier and you won't feel frustrated with them. It will feel more co-creative. And as you as a podcaster do need to take creative responsibility for the type of show you want out there. And I think that's something that I've seen podcasters do is they're like, I just want my editor to handle everything. And I get that because of the laborious aspect of it. But also, like, it's your show. So take some creative control over that and be like, this is how I want it to sound. And these are the systems I use so that you have the information to make it sound that way.
Yeah. And I think figuring out how to edit, I mean, even just listening to your episode when you're early on, especially to say what kinds of things you even want cut out. Like some people cut out every so or pause. And like, that's a lot of editing. I kind of like it to be more raw than that on my show, but it just depends on what your interest is, what your sound is, what you think is going to feel most engaging to your audience and what matters to you. I mean, there are very famous podcasts that sound terrible, in my opinion, and then I judge them for it, but I still listen because I like the content. So it's not make it or break it, but it is like, if it's hard to listen to, like say the sound quality of one speaker versus the guest is a highly different volume, that is excruciating to listen to, especially if you're like driving your car and it's on the stereo. It's like you're turning it up, but then you're turning it down. And it's like so frustrating that you might just give up. So you want to make it easy for people to listen to, easy for them to enjoy it and enjoyable. And that takes maybe some effort sometimes. One cool thing you can do, I record most of my episodes on Zoom and I can record separate audio files. So anywhere you're recording your podcast, highly recommend that you're able to record separate audio files for the different people on the show. And that allows you to sort of combat that sound check capacity so that you can equalize the different voices and how they're sounding on the show.
Oh, 100%. It's so funny you mentioned that. We just got off one of my course calls that we talk about launching. And I was trying to explain this. I'm like, if you're doing an interview, you always need to have 2 tracks because like you said, if a dog starts barking in the back, if it's 1 track, we can't edit that out. But if it's 2, we can edit it out on your end and then keep my end and then it will sound smoother. So definitely always record on 2 tracks if it's 2 people.
Yeah, absolutely. And just like geeking out on technology wise, what's your favorite microphone? What's the platform that you record on?
My microphone that I love right now and I recommend all my clients is the Blue Yeti Nano. I have the Nano because it's smaller so I can travel with it. Some people get the bigger one and they like that one too.
I have the Yeti Blue too.
Yeah, I feel like everyone has that one because it's so easy to use. And then I record on Zencastr. I am obsessed with Zencastr. It's really cool because it's a platform made with podcasters in mind first. So everything they built is to accommodate a podcaster. So there's like a place where you can take footnotes of where to edit out. You can fix your settings really easily. You can see people's microphones and if they like pass a health check to see that the microphone's actually working or not. Because sometimes guests come on and they don't know their own microphone settings and you can see it on your end where it's like, hey, their microphone's actually not working. Yes. So everything about it is really amazing and it's free. So that's why I also love it. And then a software I've been loving that it's almost crazy how underrated it is Descript. Not only does it transcribe your audio, but if you are editing yourself and you're finding it hard to edit in other platforms, when you delete the words from the transcription, it actually deletes the audio. So you could just read your whole transcription and delete words, and then the audio is getting edited as you're deleting words, which is
Wow.
insane. Yeah, I'm like, I don't know how everyone doesn't know about this software. It's like a genius level
A
software.
script.
So
I'm writing it down right now. That sounds awesome.
yeah,
Have you
highly,
used
highly recommend.
have you used Riverside.fm ever?
I have been a guest on it, but I don't use it. From my knowledge, it makes you wait while the track is uploading,
Yeah,
and
at the
I don't
end.
like doing that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
totally. The one cool thing, which
Zencaster.
is why I think that does that waiting at the end, is because it's recording locally. So say my internet was choppy while I was talking and you're the one recording, that it would still have the full recording of my end, even if our connection lost its potency or whatever. So I've been looking at
Yeah.
that because, if somebody's choppy, I don't want to have to cut their video. I want their side to be perfectly recorded. And then,
Yeah.
yeah.
Zencaster does that too.
Oh, really?
Hmm.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, that's
That's good
happened
to know.
once where the girl I was recording, speaking of traveling, I was recording in a bunk bed in Switzerland in a hostel. And yeah, the audio was like really weird on her end. And I was like, this sucks. And then I was like, wait a second. No, there's a track locally. So she sent me it and it was all good to go.
Awesome. Fantastic. Yeah, I geek out on software. So Descript sounds really fun. Thanks for that
Script's
recommendation.
amazing.
Yeah. So what's the best place for people to follow you or get a hold of you or, track you down if it's time to start a podcast?
Yes, you can follow me at Chelsea Rife on Instagram. My last name is Riffe. You can go to chelsearife.com. My podcast is called In My Non-Expert Opinion on Apple or Spotify. And you can always shoot me an email, info@chelsearife.com if you want to chat. I usually have a few one-on-one spaces open every month. And then I have a podcast launch course. So if you want to learn how to launch and get all the basics down, that's definitely the place to start. And if you want more high-level custom support, one-on-one is probably the best place to meet.
Awesome. And just to go back to what you mentioned about the mindset of like believing you can do this or that your desire is worthy of attention, what are some recommendations you might have for just looking at the mindset stuff?
Yeah, I think people need to go into it and not with this idea of I need to be number one on the charts and have 1 million downloads and get all these brand sponsors. You need to go into it thinking, what corner of the internet can I create for a community that can relate to the things I'm talking about, that values the things I'm talking about, and that wants to talk about the things that I'm talking about. When you go in it with that lens, it's a lot more fun, a lot less pressure, and it will fuel you, and you will start to get messages, reviews, ratings, etc., from people that are like, thank you, finally someone that relates to me. If you think about it from this way, some of these huge podcasters we don't relate to, right? Like, I don't make that money, I don't fly in a private jet, I don't have a team of 25 people, so it's actually unrelatable versus someone that's maybe 1 or 2 years ahead of me. I'm like, thank God she started a podcast so that I can relate to her. You are going to be that person for someone. You are going to be that resource that someone's like, finally, someone that I can relate to. And that's what I would always go back to is your voice matters and you are helping someone.
I love that. Awesome. So we will put chelseariffs.com website in the show notes. It's chelseariff.com, not Chelsea Riffs, but we'll put your website in the show notes of this episode so people can go and check you out. And you've shared so much wisdom and magic on this episode already. And I know people are going to have such a great time launching their podcast with you and monetizing it and exploring that realm. Are there any last words of wisdom you want to share with people?
I think, yeah, just going back to like your story matters, right? We all have stories, and just because you're not, don't have a blue check mark next to your name or don't have a Netflix series or something like that, that we don't care. We want to hear your story. So just know that we are ready to hear you.
Yeah. That's one of the beautiful things about podcasting too. I mean, if you're watching this on YouTube, thanks. Hi, we see you. Or we don't see you, but thanks for seeing us. But mostly podcasts are happening in people's ears, in people's quiet moments alone, when they're walking their dog or when they're driving to the store. And that just innately makes it a more personal kind of content, that they're not usually viewing it or like experiencing it in a public setting. It's really their alone time that you're like gifted to get to participate in. And so there's something that makes it really a closer community, I think, than any other platform. So we're so grateful for podcast listeners. Thank you guys so much for for listening, for watching, for also the feedback. Every time I get an email or a DM about, an episode that we release, it just brings so much joy to know that the stuff you're creating is landing somewhere and it's not just an echo chamber of you talking to your friends. It's really fun. So thank you everyone out there for listening. And thank you, Chelsea, for being on the show today.
Of course. Thank you.
Awesome. And whatever happens, keep asking big questions and taking bold action because you are here for a reason.